If you can avoid these 5 mistakes, you can make an extra $10,000 to $100,000 a year with Amazon FBA. I've noticed that a lot of people starting off with Amazon are making the same mistakes over and over again. And I think reasons number 4 and 5 are the biggest and most important ones, so make sure to take note of that. But first, let's dive into reason number 1. The first thing I wish I knew before I started Amazon FBA is to not get stuck in analysis paralysis. Maybe you've gone through this before. I certainly did with my product Vino cards. Analysis paralysis keeps you from actually launching your product, from actually taking that step and putting something out there, even if it's not perfect or you're not fully ready. Maybe you're scared to lose money and investing so much in something that you have no idea whether it's going to turn out well or not. And I've definitely been there. So after the holidays from November to December, my Vino card sales drop in January. And even though that's the case, I'm still making about $2,000 in profit. So you could be losing out on potentially $2,000 or more per month on your product if you don't have anything out there. So when I first started, it was really important for me to just put my product on Amazon, do all the manufacturing and getting people hyped about it as best I can and putting it out there. Regardless of the mistakes that I eventually found out for my product, it was beneficial to just put it out there and to get in on that holiday sale, for example. Imagine if you're ready to put your product on Amazon or you're ready to start manufacturing and you're just still a little worried about the cost, which makes total sense, but still in the long run, you could be losing out on $2,000 profit or much more per month. Essentially, the more you wait, the more that you can lose out on making a profit. I know that there's a lot of different fees associated with Amazon FBA, and it's a lot to consider. I do have a video breaking down all the Amazon FBA fees. I'll link it here for you guys. But the best thing to know is that even though that there is a lot of costs associated with Amazon FBA, it's important just to put your product on the platform, see how it performs, and make adjustments along the way. So make sure you're laser focused on launching your product, really work up to it, and again, don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis. Even though you're not 100% ready to put it out there, something is better than nothing. So do it, put it on Amazon, and just see how it goes, make adjustments along the way. The second thing I wish I knew is to order inventory in advance, especially because when you have a product on Amazon and you run out of inventory, it could blacklist your Amazon listing, meaning that Amazon sees that you're out of inventory, customers are trying to buy, they're potentially having a negative experience with wanting the product but not able to get it, so they lower your listing on the search results, which is not ideal for your product sales. When I first started with my product Vino cards, there were a lot of different steps and quite a few months of preparation before it actually went live on Amazon. So I started with the idea first, created a Facebook group to get people in on the design of the product, what I wanted the product to be, how it's good for customers. Then I wanted to make sure that there was actual interest in the product, so I created a Kickstarter campaign. I had a goal of $5,000, which I surpassed within a month, and that was a good way to crowdfund for the initial costs of the product. So the biggest thing that happened after that was actually having to get the product made, because with the Kickstarter, I only had a prototype. And because I had my Kickstarter campaign, I had given the customers the idea of having that product within a few months, which means I had to get started on manufacturing ASAP. And with the manufacturing and actual shipping costs, especially when it's coming from overseas, there were some delays in that process. So actual arrival to port and getting it sent to me and then actually shipping out to my Kickstarter backers. So there were a lot of different delays there. And because I wanted to make sure that I can inspect the product and send out to at least some Kickstarter people so that they know that it's actually rolling in and it's just going to take a little bit of time, I needed to step away from the sea shipping and have some products airship, which cost way more than I was expecting. With air shipping alone, it was about $1,200, maybe a little more, just to have very few boxes sent. It was maybe 100 boxes or so that I needed air shipped. I ordered a total of 2,000 units with my manufacturer, and the bulk of that did come through sea shipping, but because I needed to do that air shipping and fulfill the orders from the Kickstarter, it cost me an extra $5,000 just in shipping costs alone. And this really could be easily avoided started, if you plan ahead, give yourself a realistic timeline and give your customers a realistic timeline, like the Kickstarter example, and you'll be able to save so much more money in silly costs like extra shipping when really it should be a lowered cost overall. And that leads me into the third thing I wish I knew, and that is how much inventory to actually order. The straightforward answer is that not having enough inventory is really bad, and I mentioned it a little earlier that if you run out of inventory on Amazon, you can get blacklisted. And you don't want to be blacklisted, especially because that will affect your overall sales and the amount of traffic that you're getting to your listing. If people are searching for your product or something similar to your product, you want yours to come up at the top. So make sure that you're always keeping track and manage your inventory in Amazon. And in the Amazon seller account, you'll be able to easily track that. You'll see how much that you have in stock, and based on the sales, how quickly you might need to replenish that. Now, if you have a different place that you're storing your Amazon product, for example, when I first received mine, I had it stored in my parents' garage. They were gracious enough to make room for that. And that means I didn't need to send all of my 2,000 units into the Amazon warehouse, which would have been an insane amount of storage cost. And on top of that, I don't think that you're even allowed to send that much. Maybe it depends on how quickly you're selling the product, and you can work with Amazon on that. But luckily, I was only able to send in what I actually needed based on how quickly my sales are going in a period of weeks to months. So by just checking on the seller account, I can manage exactly how much inventory I have and only being charged based on what I have. So Amazon does have storage fees, and this is very dependent on the size of your product and I guess how much of that product you have at their warehouse. I'll put an estimated list of costs for storage on here so you could see, and again, it does depend on the type of product you have. Another note is to be aware of how long it's taking Amazon to process your product and have it ready for customers. And around the holiday time, so November or December, that processing time could be much longer. So you don't want to see that you have about 30 units left and then realize you need to send in product, because by the time that they even receive it, so even though you sent it, Amazon could take an additional few days to actually process those and have it ready on your listing. So you want to be aware of these timelines. You're going to have to play around with it, and again, don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Just go ahead and put your product out there and just track the flow, how quickly it's selling, what your costs for the storage fees are, and how you're budgeting with that. There's a lot to consider here. There's quite a few moving parts, and as well as letting go of control and understanding that Amazon has to do their part with the processing. So it is a lot, but don't get stuck in and don't be fearful of that process. You're just going to have to play around with it, and after a few months you should be able to get into a flow and understand how quickly your product is being sold and what you need to do for that inventory storage situation. And not only that, but ordering from your manufacturer can be very costly. So again, you want to make sure that you're not ordering a crazy amount of product unless you have a different place other than Amazon to store your product, so that you can just trickle in the inventory to the Amazon warehouse. Again, you want to consider all of those things and what's unique to your specific product. You could take the route of having it stored somewhere else and then just sending in inventory to Amazon like I've been doing, or if you want to order just enough so that you can not spend too much on manufacturing and have a good budget and be able to just send all of what you have into Amazon and pay the storage fees. It's all going to depend on what you're comfortable with and what amount of money you're willing and able to spend on your product. There's a lot to play around with, but it's all just to keep aware and mindful of. And now we're going to go into the fourth thing I wish I knew. And this is one of the biggest ones that I've actually just recently considered and learned, is to not underprice your product. When I first started with Vino cards, I had my product listed for $24.99 and it was selling great at that price point. But after crunching some numbers and then with the increased cost of just manufacturing and shipping in general, I noticed that my profit margins weren't as great as I was expecting they were. So the next thing I did was just raise it a little bit. I raised it up to $27.99. I did a smaller jump just because I wasn't sure how well it would sell at that price, because I knew it was selling so well at $24.99. I didn't want to deter customers. Luckily, at the $27.99 price point, it worked out really well. And it did improve the profit margins a bit, but as things go, everything in pricing, so storage, inventory, shipping, just the cost of product in general has been rising the last couple of years, and I needed to make another adjustment. So I raised it up to $29.99 and eventually to $34.99, which is what I have now. And by doing this, by raising it by $10, I'm essentially making an extra $10 in profit. So those are things that you should consider for your product. What is the ideal profit margin that you would like to have and that makes sense to sustain your product on Amazon, but as well as adjust with the rising costs. And unfortunately, I wish I could make the product cheaper than what it is for the customer, but because the cost of the product has been so high and it continues to rise, I needed to adjust the price. And again, you don't want to scare off your customers. These gradual increases will make it easier so that you can see how it's performing on Amazon overall. If it's affecting your sales because you raised it too high, you're going to have to try to figure out how you can lower your cost of creating the product so that you can lower the cost for the customer. In addition to the cost of the product, Amazon fees are all over the place as well. Just to sell on Amazon, that's a $39.99 monthly cost. There are also other miscellaneous fees that Amazon takes. There's returns from customers, etc. So all of that starts to eat into your profit. So you want to make sure that you're realizing what your actual profit will be in the end. So subtracting all the fees from Amazon and the cost to make your product, including shipping your product and everything else, then that's what the amount that you're left with. And simply by raising the price of your product, you could be making some extra profits. So these are all good tips to consider when you're thinking of what price you should sell your product for. Make sure that you are separating the costs and what the profit would actually be in the end. And the fifth, probably the biggest thing I wish I knew before I started selling on Amazon, was to not stop growing the business outside of just the Amazon platform. As I mentioned a little earlier, I did have a Kickstarter to help crowdfund the initial costs of my product Vino cards. And to do that, I needed to have different social media platforms to help bring people to my page, to kind of spread the awareness and the excitement for this new product that I created. And that was through Facebook, through Instagram, through YouTube, and all these different platforms that you can also use for your product. And the reason for this is you want to create some hype and some excitement, but also get them involved in the process of making it, because they'll feel attached to the process, they'll feel attached to your story and why you're doing it. And where it started to teeter off a bit was that a couple of years into the business, I wasn't taking it more seriously than I should have. And at the beginning I did, because I wanted to get it out there and I was excited about it. But once it's on Amazon, you kind of forget that you should be using these platforms like Instagram and Facebook to get people still involved in it. You also want to have email lists so that you can reach out every once in a while, not necessarily spam their email box, but email customers and letting them know if you have a special going on, or to remind them about what a great gift idea your product is, or something along the lines. And all of these different tools are so important to continue growing your business and to create an exciting, evolving journey with your product. You don't want to remain stale and in the past. You want to innovate and keep growing with your customer base. So that's a big regret, not continuing with that social media marketing essentially for my business. And it's not enough just to have your Amazon listing up there unless you're paying a lot for advertisement. But if you want to scale back and save on advertisement costs, there are free ways to do it, like social media platforms. Growing your social media platforms will gain more traffic and you'll funnel them to your Amazon listing, and creating an overall cohesive web of sales, which is what ultimately you want with your Amazon product. To get your Amazon business started, I created a full tutorial video with my partner Travis. We break down everything from creating and coming up with an idea for a product and all the things in between to actually launching it on Amazon. It is a full breakdown tutorial, everything that you'll need to know and all the costs associated with doing so. Click the video here, you won't regret it, and I'll catch you in that one.